This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, my name is Darío Espina, and welcome to this webinar, Dockerizing Development Environments. Before we start, I'm going to talk about me. I'm a senior software engineer with more than 25 years of experience in building web, client servers, and software solutions from the industry, working several projects for oil and gas, university research institutes, pharmaceutical distribution, companies, hospitals, civil engineering, among others. A language and framework I commonly use are JavaScript, Angular, PHP, C++, Arduino, Java 2E. I'm currently working for Secropia Solution as senior software developer in the Colombia's office. Okay, let's start. Today's agenda it will be as follows. We are talking about the worm syndrome, what is Docker, Docker for developers, short demos, and question and answer. So, worm syndrome, what is that? Everybody in the work as developer, in his life as a developer, has used this phrase sometime. Well, worm means works on my machine. So that's this small meme said, it works on my machine, so then we'll ship your machine. And that's how Docker was born. So what is Docker? Docker is, maybe you know what is, have seen that icon, the whale with the containers on it. Docker is basically a container engine which use the Linux kernel features like namespace and control groups to create containers on top of an operating system and automate application deployment on the container. So maybe you are guessing that a Docker is a virtual machine, and they are basically two different things. Basically, as you can see in the Docker way, is there is some infrastructure, the machine, a host operating system, and the Docker controller, and then several containerized applications running and controlled by the Docker. In other way, a virtual machine environment is used by some server as an infrastructure and a hypervisor. The hypervisor is a software that controls the virtual machines in a VirtualBox by Oracle, VMware by VMware, and basically a virtual machine is a simulated machine that's running an operating system that also has installed some application that is running on that. And these are basically the main difference between a container, a containerized application, and a virtual machine that runs an application. A container and an abstraction at the application layer that package code and dependencies together. Multiple containers can run in the same machine and share the OS kernel with other containers, each running as isolated process in user space. Containers take up less space than virtual machine. That's container images are typically tens of megabytes in size and can handle more application and require fewer virtual machines and operating system. In the other hand, a virtual machine are an abstraction of physical hardware turning one server into many servers. The hypervisor allows multiple virtual machines to run on a single machine. Each virtual machine includes a full copy of an operating system, the application necessary binaries, and libraries, taking tens of gigabytes, and VMware can also be slow to boot. So in this case, we are talking about small parts of applications that execute an application that the user created. So basically, the Docker architecture is as follows. In the client side, we have several instruction sets by the Docker build, pull, run, and in the Docker host, we have a Docker daemon that is taking care of that instruction and execute them and then make the application works. In this case, we have images and containers. So I'm going to explain the difference between that. An imaging is an operating system, a part of an operating system with some um, application that run as an entry point for that image, and a container use that image to execute the code that we add and runs the functionality that is prepared. And for the image, we have a registry that is called Docker Hub. In Docker Hub, they host several operating system images in different versions that the user can download at the moment they are created the containers. So why Docker is a good thing for developers? Every time we set a development environment, we need to set different kind of tools, frameworks, and servers to execute our code. For example, the LAMP environment, and I call it the development environment setup hell, because if you want to set up manually one of each service, you will spend hours and hours configuring and making all the parts talk to each other and work fine before you start to develop the code. Other way that many developers use to simplify that is use the SAMP. The SAMP is basically an application that installs controls several servers and services in our machines, but you have to do some fine tuning in every application to make it work before start coding. For example, let's talk about this hell case, the WordPress development. So for start developing WordPress, what you need to install? You need MySQL server, you need PHP, Apache server, and the WordPress itself. And also you need to config several applications and the servers in your machine to make it work. Apache work directory, MySQL user privilege, remote access, security, etc. URL rewrite, but the mod rewrite and modifying the htaccess file. Also configure the connection between the WordPress and the MySQL. By the other hand, you have to change the upload size, the timeouts, and other configuration in the PHP. And last, but make the PHP can access the MySQL. Let's see how is the Docker way to make or to create a WordPress development process. I'm going to share my screen. Sorry. Okay. I'm going to So for creating a WordPress development environment, we need only one file, the Docker Compose YAML. This file is organized in this way. Every YAML file uses a version. We are using the syntax for the version 3. This set of instructions in these files not only creates a WordPress environment, also creates MySQL service, and also install PHP MyAdmin to interact with the data. So let's see what is how this works. We define services for the Dockers. A service is a number of different containers that execute something. Okay. In this case, we have three services that are there are the DB that is creates the database server for the application, also defines the user, the passwords, the database that are created at the moment this service start. Then we have the WordPress service that downloads an image from the Docker Hub that has WordPress and set a volume that we are going to discuss that later, and also set different environment variables and then export some ports to the user, and lastly define a network. And finally, we have the PHP MyAdmin service that start a small machine that run PHP. Finally, we have a network structure and the volumes that are used for the application. So how this work? At the moment we start execute this file, the process start by downloading the image from the Docker Hub server. And as soon the image is downloaded, it configured as follows. He creates a DB data on our side. This is using the Docker notation. The left side is on the host machine, and the right side of this line of code is on the container side. Okay, so we are exposing this directory DB data to the to the container, and in the container that folder is reflected in this directory in the MySQL. And then we set the information that the image when start running uses to set up the environment. So he create this password for the MySQL root account. He creates this database. He also create this user and assign this user to this password to the user. And then attach this service to this network called WP WordPress. As soon as it follows to downloading and setting up the MySQL server, is starting to create the WordPress servers. Also, the server is the image is downloaded from the Docker Hub. Let's go to the Docker Hub to see what is there. So this is in the information for the official Docker image for WordPress. These are the different versions that are available to the user, and these are the tags used to that. So if we want to use this image as a Docker, we only execute this, and he downloads the WordPress image and make the container to run. And as soon as downloads ends, it sets the volume. In this case, The directory, the local directory is mapped into the var and into the WordPress configuration folder for the content. And we set the users and the password and the connection to the database. If we see, there is using the DB at port 3306, and that is defined by default as the password, as the port used by the MySQL server, and this name is the service name that we created. Also, one of the instruction here is that depends on. You can set a list of all service that this service you are defining here requires to be up and running before this start to work. And finally, we export the ports for the server, that is the HTTP and the HTTPS server, and attach this service to the network. Finally, it starts and the deployment, the installation of the PHP. It uses the image from the PHP myadmin and exports the port 80 in the container as 8080 on the user side. Sets the environment variable, which is the host, the password used for the root password, and attach it to the network. And this is the definition that is created here. So let's run this. To run the file, we have to be in the same directory as the file is, and we simply docker compose up. This may take several minutes, depends on your internet connection, but this will be less painful than manually set up and install all the services by itself. So right now it's downloading the MySQL image from the Docker Hub. Now it's downloading and configuring the WordPress image. One thing, and the main thing why Docker are very useful for developers is that we can set the same development environment in every machine that the team uses, no matter it is Windows or Mac OS or Linux. The image are created in the same way and the image are configured in the same way. So there is the most exactly development environment for every user. So there is no way that someone says that it only works on my machine. That should be work for everything. So now the application has the containers are finally and then to configure and it set it up and now are running. You can see the message for every single service. In this case, this is the WordPress, the DB starting, all the process, what is the entry point. In this case, MySQL Server. For WordPress, the starting, the initializing. Then he started to create the folders and that are needed. If we check in our directory here, we have one file and two new folders created, themes and plugins. And this is marked with an X, and then as soon, because this file is required, but it's not yet created by the WordPress. And then we have the PHP MyAdmin service starting and creating all the necessary files. The most complex image to start is the database. So it takes several structures to be up and running, like here. And we are going to see how this work. So let's go to the browser. And if we go to localhost, we see the WordPress installation screen displayed. We we didn't set any configuration in the WP config file. We created the salt instruction, any configuration. Even we didn't type any code to configure the WordPress to connect to the database. So, and if we go to localhost 8080, here is the PHP MyAdmin running, and the user is root, and the password is password. And you can see there is the WordPress database created, but no tables are yet created. So let's fill this form. And let's start WordPress. And if I refresh here, we now see all the tables for the WordPress database are created. And let's log in. This is the WordPress running on the Docker, and this is the WordPress site. We just created and configured in about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And if you are going to develop some code for the themes or plugins, you have to create it here as a normal user if you are developing locally in your machine. So that's in case of the WordPress. So if to see everything is working, you can see here the WordPress console log. If you don't want to see this, there is a way. Let's stop this. and we can use this command. The D is the demonized version of that, so the Docker Compose start, and you can see any of the console logs display on the Windows. Just simply start. The containers are created. As soon as created, you are back again to the console. And if you want to see this is running, just use this command, and you will see the containers running and the ports that they are mapped. So if you have a local version of PHP MyAdmin, you only have to configure to this, and you will connect it to the MySQL server running on the container. If I run here, this update this is running, and to stop this, I just only need to stop the containers are stopped, so this is no longer working, and finally we can down the container to reserve space. Okay, as simple as a 53 lines file created 3 servers with database, WordPress, and my PHP MyAdmin to handle to check the data on the database. What if I'm running another kind of development hell to configure, like the PHP? It's basically the same as the WordPress. In this case, we don't have to mess with the WordPress configuration. So let's run some demo. Sorry. This file is different because we have some instruction here that is a context to build. And if we check here, we have another file that is a Docker file, and this is different. You can create different containers with several instructions. In this case, we are creating a PHP image container, with custom PHP image configuration. In this case, we are using the PHP 7.1 FPM image, and we are installing the extension for the MySQL connection and the PDO MySQL to run on the connection between the PHP server and the MySQL. Also, we are using Nginx here as our web server. So we have a configuration in where is the application installed that we need to map into the HTML file, and where is the configuration that is needed by the Nginx to run, the ports that we are mapping inside the container and outside, which image here it depends to run, and the PHP configuration, and the MySQL version that we are going to use. If we remember in the previous example, we only had one version, 5.7, and then we used the last steps for the 5.7 branch. And in this case, we are specifying which version of MySQL we are going to install. Also, we have defined where the data is stored, and we have a different uh, instruction here that is initial data. What happened when the MySQL server start? The server looks for this file stored in this directory as the entry Docker entry point db init. This is an instruction for the Docker. He executes what any instruction that is stored in this file. In this case, and on initial data, we have a small SQL script that creates a database and add a table and sets 3 records on that table. So let's run this. The same command, docker compose up. So first start downloading and configuring the MySQL, because this version is different from the version that we use on the MySQL WordPress sample. And now it's downloading the PHP 7.1 FPM image from the Docker Hub. That one is created by the Docker file here. And this is a prerequisite for this image to be created. That is the configuration for the others component required to be installed there. That's my MySQL extension and the PDO extension for connecting to the MySQL server. Now the images are created, and if we see this, the PHP code, we have a DB user and DB password, and its user some environment variables. Those definitions are made here, and they are the same as the MySQL configuration. So the user for the root password is 123.456 and is used here. So the PHP code uses that information to connect to the PDO component that was installed during the configuration of the image, and then execute a simple query to retrieve the information on the database and then display it to the user. So that one is on the 9,000 port. So let's go here and check to the localhost 9,000. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, that should be running there. Let me see if something went technically wrong. Let's stop this. Let's see if there is something wrong here. This is the FPM is running. MySQL is continue working. So let's try again. Nope, doesn't want to run. Let's see. It's not 900. We have to go to the Nginx web server. It's 8080. Sorry, 8080. And there we have. This is the simple PHP application running. If we made any changes to it, and we just simply to refresh the page and the change is displayed here. As you can see, there is very easy to configure and create a small development environment using Docker. There is more complex configurations in this file. For example, we can assign IP direction to this for every service, for every container. If I check, let's stop this. If I check for the IP network configuration of this computer, we will see that we have this server here. This IP address and is assigned to the Docker. So the Docker inside internally assign an IP address to every one of the server there, so they are connected, they can see each other, and the way we can use to connect to this server is using the service name, as in the example for the WordPress. In this case, when we need to connect from the WordPress to the database, we only say the server is DB and this is the port we need to connect. And for the PHP MyAdmin, the host that is going to connect is DB, and this is the name here. Also, we can define, here is define a network called WordPress, and the network is defined here. We can create different kind of drivers there as bridge network and set different configuration for the network that is also be needed if in case we need to add complex instruction into the connectivity of the containers. Sorry, I closed the presentation. And now, if you have any question.
You have some of the on the chat.
Okay. Yes, I can share that Docker file. The first question is, can you share the Docker Compose YAML to file, please? For reference, yes, I can share that. I will create a small GitHub repo, and I will send you if you want it. And in the second example, can we set the source folder for Nginx to be a Git repository? Not for the Nginx per se, but you can set here in the here for the PHP, you can execute commands like git pull and clone or anything you need to execute in this place, and leave the configuration on the Nginx as normal as this defined here, because the code that is changing will be located in this part of the application. Any other question? The question is from Hector. I guess for existing WordPress site is almost similar steps. Yes, you only have to download the theme or the plugin that you are working on, and set that on the structure of the file. And sorry, and in the section you map the directories and files to be exposed internally to the WordPress. You can set here in this part. You can set the files that you need to be exposed to the container. Any other question? I don't have used that I have doesn't have the opportunity to use Docker Swarm or Kubernetes to work, because basically that is used in most case for deployment of the final application, and that will be another kind of chat, because there is the configuration for the service is different, because we need to create the way that we can escalate the images on the server, so we can adapt to the number of user or requests in a moment. Any other question? Okay, I will thank you for joining me in this webinar, and I will send you the information about the requested code for the Docker Compose file for the WordPress example. Thank you. Bye.